Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to take a second and check the Zoom webinar, make sure we can be heard.
I'm hearing you loud and clear, Sam. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Going to go to 7.2 or do we want to cover? Okay, welcome back to our meeting. We'll start with item 7.2, consideration and discussion of rescinding resolution number 2020-22, approve continuation of a local health emergency related to the 2019 coronavirus COVID-19 as proclaimed by the Lake County Public Health Officer. CAO Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Last week, your board pulled item resolution number 2020-22 and requested that admin seek the advice of the PHO to determine whether this needs to be continued to be on the agenda. And there is a letter in your packet. I'm just going to read the last paragraph into the record. I believe that the continued enforcement of an emergency declaration is no longer necessary given the current state of the pandemic. Per the direction of the California Department of Public Health, the Health Service Department will ensure that any changes in the community-based spread of COVID-19 that could impact the county is communicated. Thank you for your consideration of this request. Sincerely, Dr. Carl Sporer.
Okay. We have comments from the board.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for bringing this back this week.
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, getting ready to get this turkey on. But a question, so much came out of this, including, I don't know what iteration it's in, but our COVID work policy, our work site policy. So impact of I assume that will stand in some sense as a permanent policy, or could be morphed into a permanent aerosol transmissible disease policy. So it may not be directly linked to the resolution here, but I'm just curious what we have or can make permanent in what we've learned over the past 3 years, because clearly the state of emergency, as long as there's no cost recovery going on, the resolution can go bye-bye, but a lot has happened in the last 3 years, and part of it has greatly impacted remote work, how we design our workspaces, how we congregate in crowded rooms and stuff like that. So is our worksite policy going to survive if we take this resolution?
Yes, it will. And what we can do, and I see she's right there. Ms. Sam can answer your question better than I can.
Yes. Good afternoon, Pam Samek, HR Director. The temporary emergency standards cease to be the middle of February, and it'll become a part of our injury and illness prevention program. So risk management will be taking that back over now that they have a risk person on staff. We're reviewing that, and that should be published very soon with updated forms, because we still have to investigate, and some procedures related to workers' comp. So that should be coming out very shortly.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Anyone from the public? I see no hands in the Zoom room. Okay, bring it back to the board for action.
So just a motion then, correct?
Yeah,
Madam
to
Chair,
rescind.
To
I
rescind.
move to rescind resolution number 2020-22 entitled Approved Continuation of a Local Health Emergency Related to the 2019 Coronavirus, COVID-19, as proclaimed by the Lake County Public Health Officer.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. My volume was off, sorry.
Did you oppose it?
No, I was saying aye.
Oh, okay.
Apologize.
All right. Okay, thank you. Motion passes. 7.3, does that work for you? Okay. Discussion and consideration of potential funding source for Mike Marsh EMS Consulting in the amount of $20,000 for emergency ambulance strike team support through Regional Disaster Management Services Association resource order request to decompress 2 overwhelmed hospitals during emergency proclamation winter storm.
Thank you, Chair. Last week, We requested permission to look further into the ask to use ARPA funds for this funding. We found that it was an eligible ARPA expense. However, I can't speak to the contract, and I can't speak to any questions the board may have. I asked Director Portney to be in attendance to answer any of those questions.
Okay. Questions from the board? Or did you want to speak on this, Director Portney, first?
Yes, that
Oh,
was
okay, sorry.
possible.
Go ahead.
First order of business, I just have a question. I noticed on the agenda items, the memos are not active for all the memo links. Is it possible to get those, at least this one, activated for records or add it to attachment?
Johanna, do you want to?
That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, so
for the
we've been having issues with Granicus, but there are two alternative ways to view the memos. You can look at the agenda packet and scroll to that item where the memo would be, or if you go to the agenda page, you can click meeting details, and then you can click on the file for the item, and then click legislative text, I think it is, and then that'll open the memo.
Thank you, Joanna. I greatly appreciate that. So we're here today to talk about a contract that we have already had in place since the 24th with Mike Marsh Consulting when the emergency proclamation was in place for the winter storm. A little bit of historical context. As you all know, we have an interim, wonderful PHO, public health officer, Dr. Carl Spoor. And part of the original agreement with Dr. Spoor was that he'd be available to serve at PHO capacity, but when things go bang and we need emergency response, supports would be leveraged like Mike Marsh Consulting to help with disaster response. So with me today, I have representatives from Sutter Health, Adventist Health, and Mike Marsh Consulting who were very collaboratively working together to decompress both hospitals and preserve the quality of life for our residents. Now, I want us to keep in mind that this is not necessarily looking prospectively. This contract is looking retrospectively to settle dues that we needed to expend for Mike Marsh's services, and that is through the 23rd, effectively the 24th through the 1st. And what Mike Marsh was able to do was fulfill aspects of the 17 functionalities of the medical health operations area coordination and partnership. And the reason why, again, going back to my original comment, is because we do not have, at this time, and I know you're actively working on it, a full-time PHO. So that's a part of the agreement. Now, something that I think is really important is what happened on the between the 23rd and even, well, it just stopped up till today and maybe into the foreseeable future, is we had unforeseen, often term used unprecedented snowstorm here in Lake County. Our county was isolated, blocked off, not able to get transport in or out, especially on the 23rd through the 25th, when the hospitals were trying to decompress, which is essentially removing heads from beds, transferring patients port to port. When they got into their queues to try to find resources to move people, patients, there were none available in our county. So what do we do? What do they do? the hospitals, once something goes bang and there's no resources available, they contact the medical health operations area coordinator, in this case me. Understanding that there were 55,000 residents, I believe that was the projected number at this time, out of service, out of power, landlocked. My phones weren't working, some of my emails weren't working. We had to leverage all the resources that we have in our toolbox to make sure that the hospital's request to decompress were met. And that's the obligation that we have to the county as the medical health operations area coordinator. Now, I see here that a attachment from the, I believe it's Willie Cepeda, president of the Chiefs Association, wrote in with, I don't know who, but a consortium of folks to identify a disagreement with this payment, indicating use of tax dollars. I believe maybe provided in the letter, day-to-day, sunny skies, the operations that he outlined would suffice. I also really enjoyed seeing that he's going to be hosting some events at the hospitals for training. I see a reference to maybe we should give this money to Morgan Fox, who's our 90 days new. I believe it's 90 days, could be 60. She's on, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, 60 to 90 days new, North Coast EMS coordinator, who respectfully admitted that, you know, she's still grounding herself with the processes, so she's grateful that we took on this responsibility. So I think that the points that are made in this rebuttal to this expense are past due because the service has already been provided. But again, going back to my first statement that per our interim contract with Dr. Spohr, we will plan to, if, God forbid, another emergency happens where we need to decompress hospitals, if we do not have adequate staffing and cannot manage it ourselves, we will continue to use the resource. Now, the reason why I bring it to this topic, to the board agenda, and to you today, is these events, right, are expensive to the hospital, to our self-funded department. And I'm grateful to the administrative office that they were able to speak with the powers that be to leverage ARPA funding to cover this, which was originally meant to go to the LIMSA RFP process, which, surprisingly, if you look at it, as we were trying to round out the contract, the MOOC and 17 functionalities are in there. So the money is well used through ARPA to justify this expense, but neither here nor there. What I will say is this is not a one-off event. And again, God forbid, we have another series of events, right, like this, where we need to decompress hospitals. Throughout this board meeting, it was indicated that our population is getting older, our population is getting more vulnerable. And they're not relocating. So we're going to see continued hospital burden scores increase potentially. So this isn't a one-off type of event, right? But it is an event. And so what I want to express to the board is the importance of covering this cost, surely, but also taking into consideration what future events look like, right? And so understanding this came out of ARPA funding, and I believe there's maybe $45,000 left in ARPA funding that's already allocated. If we have 3 more events like this into 2024, right, it's exhausted. Then where does this emergency funding to this type of need come from? And that's something to look prospectively at, because we cannot refuse, once the hospitals call the MOOC, to say, sorry, we can't help you, but it is at a cost. And so I'll digress, and I know that we are in a phase of questions and comments. So if appropriate, I would like to pass it to any of my peers who have comments or questions on the issue, or by all means, the board can advise accordingly. Thank you.
Is there questions from the board right now? Or do you want to hear from?
Is there, if there's more, I'd like to hear it all.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so we have hands up. We have Tim Stevens. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for allowing me a moment to talk. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for Sutter Lakeside. And first I want to thank the county for standing up and helping there in this situation. You know, the hospitals both here are in the community and, you know, attempting to take care of the citizens and work in this space. You know, we've not been asked in the past to really stand up EMS services and be in this space. So, you know, when you talk about the hospitals being overloaded, I think the entire county was overloaded at this time. It wasn't just Sutter Lakeside or Adventist. I think the whole county was overloaded at this time and needed to decompress beyond just the hospitals in that sense. And, you know, we're certainly willing to do whatever we can do to help, you know, build something more sustainable in this space. You know, currently, you know, the EMS service and the ambulance service, you know, we rely on the fire department and other agencies to do that. There's been a lot of discussion if that should be a Sutter responsibility and Advent Health responsibility. Adventist, I'm sorry, I came from Florida and Advent Health was there. You know, that's certainly something I have talked to a couple of chiefs about and interested in exploring. How do we create a better partnership to care for this community? I live in this community and I'm part of the community, and I don't want to be the next person that needs to be transferred out when the system's overloaded. So I appreciate the county stepping up and helping out and helping the citizens, which every one of the people in our hospitals are taxpayers and important to this community. So certainly a lot more to discuss. I think that kind of gives an overview of my view.
Thank you. Dr. Bloom?
Sorry, I apologize. I seem to be having a problem with my camera, so I apologize that I'm not on screen as the camera is on. But I also did want to express my my thanks to the county and my thanks to the Department of Public Health during this event. We multiple times had an overwhelmed and overloaded emergency department. At one point, I believe that we had 11 of our 12 emergency department beds with very ill patients requiring transfer. And certainly we cannot continue to provide the services for our residents of our county in our emergency department if we only have one room available to see patients and no ability to transfer patients out. So we are grateful and thank you for the services that were provided and for the ability to call for help through our ESF 8 function and our Department of Public Health and our governmental functions. I would also like to state that the issues that Director Portnoy had mentioned regarding the ongoing need is absolutely true. And to Tim Stevenson's point, for the residents of our county, this is an ongoing, anticipated to be an ongoing problem and an ongoing need, and actually affects us not only during events such as we experienced with the snowstorm, but affects us on a much more regular basis when there's weather or when there are local resources not available, which unfortunately is quite frequent. So, this topic is quite near and dear to me and to the function of this hospital, and to be prepared and able to care for the residents of our county appropriately when the need is there in emergency situations. I just wanted to put a little color, and I'm not sure if I actually will cede time to the other folks with their hands up. Thank you.
Thank you. Pauline Orr?
Thank you. I also just wanted to echo my peers. That weekend was a very scary weekend. I'm glad our community doesn't always see what's going around in the background. You know, our EMS system, our services are brittle day to day, but when you throw in a storm like that into the situation, that heightens the level of gaps and how brittle the system is. Picture your loved one, your wife, your father, your mother, your son, your daughter needing to get somewhere for an intervention that is going to save their life. And when you call the system for help, there's no transport, there's no availability of anybody to come and get them where they need to be. I am very thankful that we have Mohawk and the support from the county for everybody, be they full-time employees, consultants, contractors. We were so thankful for the help we got that weekend, and but it does concern me, the stress and the cracks on this system. And I really hope we learn from this, that there needs to be long-term solutions from all partners in this, and that Mohawk is so important to help stand up resources that unfortunately we were not able as a county to provide. Our EMS system was just not able to be, they were out doing a lot of important things for our community members. And so when you call and you're needing to be transported somewhere, be it for a stroke or an MI or a heart attack, it can't be 48, 68 hours that you're going to sit somewhere without transport. And so bringing it back to the patient, bringing it back to us, our community members, each of us are patients. I ask that this team look at this service that's currently being provided and work towards long-term solutions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ed Beltran?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Board of Supervisors. My name is Ed Beltran. I am the Director of Emergency Services here at Adventist Health. And I want to just kind of share a little bit of a perspective that I had as I was the incident commander for the event and spent about 12 hours here in the hospital prior to being relieved by somebody. And so what I want to share with you is that, you know, I'm no stranger to disasters or hospital management in that sense. I was on duty the day of the campfire in Paradise, California, the day that event struck the hospital there. So I'm quite familiar with having to do emergency evaluation, treatment, triage, and evacuation of a hospital. That being said, one of the things that gave me a great cause for worry is that I'm a combat veteran. And one of the things that I don't enjoy doing is having to have a conversation with my providers on duty and asking them to triage people and decide who is going to have to take one of the limited ambulances that could potentially come in and who is going to have to stay behind. And that's a difficult conversation to have outside of a battlefield because we're here to save lives, we're here to take care of people. This situation has exposed a large gap in the services that's provided to the county. And this deficit has a great impact to the county in the sense that we need more of these services and the availability of these services to deliver adequate patient care, to be able to get these people to the locations that they need to go to when the facilities in county can't deliver the services that they need. So it is one of those things that I do have quite a bit of cause for concern about. I can certainly validate what has been shared by our peers so far. This is something that I feel like needs to be fully investigated. I'm quite thankful for Mike Marsh and getting together the strike teams that we had, Jonathan as well and his role in that. And I just appreciate the opportunity to express this to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Sabatier?
So I just want to make sure that we focus on the item in hand, which is basically where the funding comes from. Our directors have the ability to spend up to $25,000, so the question is not necessarily whether the contract or services were necessary. It's more of who's going to pay for it and what out of which budget. And right now it's being offered that it could come out of the ARPA funds. The IFT issues that we have within our hospital systems are very real, are known, and there is some work in the background that's maneuvering to figure out how to bring solutions to the surface, and looking forward to those coming out. And I think that we're looking at an event that occurred that was definitely everything from roads to hospitals to schools, everything shut down for a moment, and having to figure out how to navigate through that. It was very difficult, and that includes the hospital settings. So again, I want us to, I'd like for us to focus more on the $20,000 and the who's paying for it and out of what budget. So I have a couple of questions, and I appreciate Director Portney's time. I did spend a little bit of time with him reviewing some of this, and I do have some questions still that remains. One is, when looking at the scope of service of what was provided, a lot of that seems to be within the scope of North Coast EMS. Is it possible to build North Coast EMS for doing the work that was provided? Because the work provided was absolutely necessary. We needed to provide something for our hospitals to decompress, but just kind of curious if that's a potential avenue for payment.
Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier, for the question. It is on the record when I asked if this is something that would be facilitated by North Coast EMS. It was indicated that North Coast EMS is administrative only, and so they would not be filling the functionality of the MOAC in this situation. So in short, no, they would not be filling this. And now, no, they would not be filling this.
Okay. And I don't know enough to agree or disagree, but a part of me feels that is a piece of the puzzle at the very least, maybe not the entirety of it. Also, in the sense that the hospitals made the request, the hospitals being part of an emergency system and the hospitals also not being public agencies, have the hospitals been offered to see if they can pitch in to help pay for the requirements of what was needed to help them decompress?
So to answer that question, Supervisor, the hospital was actually very generous in covering and sharing actually between the hospital's costs for the strike team, for example. An ambulance strike team in full can range anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 per team. And prior to be fiscally responsible and respect taxpayer dollar, when the negotiation was, when the ask was triggered for the MOAC, the hospital came to the table, and we had open conversation around, what they could cover. And they said, you know what, this is an emergency. We're going to cover the cost for the strike team. So they were, and we did, the health department, the MOAC, did our part to make sure that we were fiscally responsible with the taxpayer dollar to find the best value with the highest quality of care for the patient. So in short, to answer your question, the hospitals, both hospitals stepped up, they worked together, and they paid their fair due.
Okay. And then the last part, obviously, is we're looking at potentially the ARPA funds. I know that we have gone through a process to figure out where the ARPA funds are going, and that some funds were set aside for public health, as you stated, for the RFP. I don't know if that's the best source to come from, but I know that there are other sources. I know that I've been through and looking at your budget as well. I know that unfortunately, and I don't mean to bring it up for any other purpose than this conversation, but I know that you have a high vacancy rate at this moment in time, so I know the funds are available there. And the fact also that the ARPA has gone through a process such as the ARPA committee to review and approve expenditures prior to going to the Board of Supervisors, which this has not done. So those are my questions, and happy to listen to my colleagues to figure out exactly what the right direction will be.
To answer the last question around the budget, we are the health department. Some may and some may not know, but we're considered a self-funded department. And when we look at vacancy rates, a lot of our contracts that we have are coming to term in 2024. So some of those may not be most fiscally valuable to fill at this point. For example, building out a robust COVID-19 team to respond to COVID-19. Now, we're not out of the woods yet, right? Just 2 weeks ago, we were in the low tier. Now we're in the medium tier. That's why in the memo that we drafted from Dr. Spohr, we still want to exercise caution. But when it comes to, vacancies in our department, the money, since we're self-funded, is allocated for a grant to fulfill a certain role. So it's not like we have free-floating money around to cover costs like this. That are, thank you.
Thank you.
So given that this happened during a declared disaster, a now declared disaster, is this something that can be recovered?
I don't know if that's...
This is a question.
Yeah, question for you.
Oh.
Yeah.
The funds for, I don't believe so. Well, maybe in the future, we just got paid, I think, 7 years later for, emergency response for, maybe one of the fires that happened a while ago. So it takes a long time to maybe trickle back. Maybe we could find a way to do that, but I know the consultant, needs to maintain a roof over his head and food on the table. So I'm pretty sure they're ambitious to get paid as soon as possible, but maybe retrospective pay is something that I can look into with the sheriff's office and the county admin.
And can you tell me how many days this contract was for again? I think you said the 23rd or the 24th through March 1st?
Yep, so the 24th up to, so the 23rd through the 1st of this month was the duration of the event, which we're closing out right now, an after action report for your review. Now, the contract has not been terminated as of yet because I was waiting to get feedback on the emergency declaration from the EOC. Now, what we are seeing is that understanding that emergency proclamation or declaration may still need to maintain while the county admin department does their due diligence. In good faith, I believe that we are in a prime spot to now terminate this contract after we figure out how we can get the contractor paid. So it's still active and it's pending termination. Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Sabatier.
I'm glad Chair Pyska mentioned it. That was actually one of the points I wanted to make, and absolutely I would say work with either admin, Sheriff Howe, or auditor controller who deals with our emergency financing to make sure that everything is on the books in the appropriate way so that we can look to get that reimbursement, because in the long run, whether it comes today or 7 years later, if we can get reimbursed, we should definitely be applying that. And of course, that does not mean that the contractor would be waiting for that reimbursement. That would be ridiculous, but it's always nice to get repaid and reimbursed from whatever agency, whether it's Cal OES or FEMA or whatever is available to us.
So, but does that if we're using ARPA funds, can we use it for funding that we plan to get reimbursed for, because then it's going to be coming right back to us?
We'll have to look into it.
And the answer would be no, because it has to be spent by 2024. And then at that point, whatever we get reimbursed, we would probably have to give back if that was reimbursing our ARPA funds.
Right. Any other questions or comments from the board? Supervisor Green?
Yeah, it just sounds like we're just here to pay a bill. And I've heard a whole lot of talk from those assembled, and of course there are people not able to be with us today who also wanted to talk about things probably other than just how do we pay this bill. And I'm sensitive to the idea there may be other pots of money, but what I'm looking at, staffers recommended we use ARPA money, which is emergency money in its own sense. So I think whatever concerns may be about the broader scheme of things and how we're handling transfers out during good times, and sounds like during the end of February it was very far afield from those good times. It sounds like it was kind of scary. But we're not here to litigate that and discuss next steps on that. We're here to consider how to pay for what is a very small-scale contract that the Health Services Director let in his discretion as the MOAC. I don't see any compelling reason why we would spend a huge amount of time looking for other pots of money or stuff like that. I assume there's one more deliverable out of this contract, and that's the after-action report. Certainly that'll be fodder for discussion later on down the road. But how about we pay the contractor, and then we can actually get that after-action report, and then we can all come back and have another more robust discussion at another meeting about the future of how we handle these things. So I'm ready to proceed with this as presented, unless there's some more pressing concerns that my colleagues have.
Okay. Go ahead. Oh,
Is that me?
Courtney. Yeah.
Yeah, just in response to Supervisor Green. So it was only maybe 2 weeks ago that we got approval to use ARPA funding, and we have to put on the board of agenda, I think it's 2 weeks in advance. So this is a placeholder to ensure that this is where you want to use the funding so that we are maintaining fiscal integrity. And if I had this money floating around, we wouldn't be here today, right? But this isn't money that, I can just dictate when and where and how to use it. So that's why it's on the board agenda for today. And it sounds like we have a general consensus that, we can move forward and use this funding. And this is great news. I know myself, the team, contractor, we're all excited for that. And, we appreciate you and the board fulfilling the request.
Okay. Well, I have a concern. I think we should be submitting this for reimbursement and making sure that it comes back to us in whatever timeline it needs. And if this is a request for ARPA funds, it should go through the ARPA committee. So those are my two issues with this request.
So it has gone through the ARPA committee, and that's what took 2 weeks to get the confirmation that we now have today.
No, because we're on the ARPA committee.
It was indicated to me that it got approved.
Okay.
So.
Stephen?
Stephen Carter, Assistant County Administrative Officer. So $200,000 from the committee was set aside specifically for EMS activities in the contract. And we felt that this is actually part of EMS contracting. It's just not, exactly what the committee envisioned. But there was $200,000 set aside for this type of EMS activity. It's just supposed to be one contract.
Okay.
All right, so, there we go. Just a couple questions just to, I guess, circle back. You did address the letter from the chiefs, and I just wanted to just ask again, you might have said this, but I just want to make sure. The work that was conducted, is it redundant work that was conducted that was done by someone, some other entity or other agency or anything like that? That's what I'm getting from the letter, if that makes sense, that it didn't work.
Yeah, and with all due respect, I didn't really understand the letter because it's maybe looking at, future endeavors. Again, on a sunny, clear day, that letter makes sense, but this is looking retrospectively. So I don't no, there's no redundancy. When something would go bang and the hospital calls the MOAC, we would follow this protocol per the drop down if no resources were available anyways. Just to be transparent, the letter didn't make sense, and that's why I was asking if the memos were activated, because maybe they wouldn't have submitted that if they maybe read the memo. I don't know, but that letter doesn't correlate with the situation at hand. Maybe they didn't have historical context, but if they need historical context, then feel free to reach out and I'll be able to update them. Feel bad they wasted their time. It was well crafted, and again, I'm really excited to see what they're doing with the trainings in the hospital, and it read well.
Okay, thank you. And so since it's retrospective, my next question doesn't matter. I was going to ask how it states also to appropriate funding towards North Coast EMS, but as you say, it's a different situation, so don't even worry about that question. Thanks.
Yeah, and I guess my comments, Stephen, thank you for coming up and clarifying that, because I just want to make sure that $200,000 that was allocated for EMS purposes, it does say contract, this 20,000 would just come out of that. He's saying we'll take it'll be 180 that's available for the contract now in the 20. So for me, I know the ARPA board probably did not envision this instance happening. I don't think anybody did. That's why we were kind of caught off guard there. And, in this circumstance, I would definitely agree. Any other ARPA funds need to go through the ARPA program, but being that it's in line with what was approved, EMS medical services, that's why I'm prepared to move forward. So it's not like out of left field here. Now, the emergency was, but I think it stays in line with what the amount was approved for. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and the reason I have a problem with it is because we put aside this 200,000 for, proactively working on the issues that we have. And this draws down at $20,000 that we will not get back. And I would like to see this submitted as part of our disaster, and I don't know where that funding comes from, so that we can seek reimbursement for it. Go ahead.
So I guess just my final comment, obviously this needs to be paid. We asked somebody to do some services. Services were rendered. And again, just to repeat myself, the director has the ability to spend up to $25,000 without approaching us. This is about where the money comes from. I know we have funds in other buckets that we can use, and I'd like to just say, admin, please, I want to not give back $20,000. And I think it's worth it to spend our 20 rather than spending the ARPA and getting refunded at one point and having to give anything back. The ARPA funds that were set aside for the 200,000 is for exactly what our hospitals just spoke about, which is the long-term solution. And that was money dedicated for that. And I don't think that the current RFP that Director Portney was speaking of is the only expenses that will lead us to a long-term solution. I'd like for that to be kept whole because it has great purpose for solving these problems. And I don't think you need to come back to the Board of Supervisors when you find that $20,000, because you have the ability to pay that bill without having to come back to us. So that would be my direction that I ask. As far as going to the ARPA committee, I mean, eventually the Board of Supervisors does make the decision on it. So while it may have skipped the process, the emergency skipped many processes as well. So I'm okay with us making the final decision, because eventually we are the final decision on that. But I think it's possible to figure out a different way to make sure that the ARPA funds that have been dedicated and are already pre-approved for that long-term solution, and that we don't lose it once we get reimbursed. That way we just make sure that things move forward.
Stephen?
I do understand what, what you're talking about with ARPA, but then you're saying it's a general fund expense, which in all intents and purposes, it's not. Now, public health does have funding that can be used for this, and it's called realignment. It is not in great abundance, but that would keep it within the department for if it ever gets reimbursed through the claiming for through the state or feds. I have not heard of any successful claims for this fire yet. We were just declared, so we would have to talk with disaster finance first. But if we did use ARPA now and we did also claim it, we wouldn't be able to claim it in the first place if we used ARPA now. So there wouldn't be the doubling up. It just would either not happen or we use a different source and then try to be reimbursed.
Stephen, how likely is the refund to take place, if that makes sense? Like you're saying if we get refunded, is that like a chance that may not happen?
I would have to talk to disaster finance, but it depends on our expense level on whether it will or not.
Okay.
How much we submit. And we don't have a large expense at this point.
Just a question then for the ARPA committee people. I guess I'm not clear on what the original 200K set aside was for, if it was to fix LEMSA or EMCC. Last I heard, we were not even fielding active ideas on that. So if the idea is to keep the 200K whole because we have a really good idea what we're going to do with that, last I heard we don't, and even this, if we're quibbling over 20K and getting letters about that, you know, I'm not entirely hopeful that that ARPA set aside is going to come to fruition, absent some information I don't have right now. So if we want to keep that ARPA nest egg whole at 200K, certainly open to that discussion. But I'm also, you know, I got on this board to pay some bills, and I'd like to pay the bill today. So I'll defer to the people who had the original vision.
Go ahead.
And I'll just add that there has been an RFP. At this moment in time, it's on hold, but there is the potential for a contract coming to the Board of Supervisors to review some of our policies, internal policies, in regards to ambulance ordinance and IFTs and other things. Mainly, I want to say LEMSA stuff, even though that gets really complicated with North Coast EMS, but things in regards to our policies on how we go through these processes. And so that, I don't know what the exact amount because it hasn't come to the board yet, but I also know that, and I got a nod from Director Portney when I stated that it would probably not be the only one that we need to get to in order to have those long-term solutions. So that's why I'm looking to keep it whole, because of that. And of course, the ARPA funds, I think we should not hesitate to try and get reimbursements, but if we do, then we're just going to have to give it back anyways if we use ARPA funds. I think any emergency, that's been kind of our practice, is to send out whatever it is. I forget what the actual number of the form is that we're all supposed to fill out when we work on an emergency. 214 or 215, but we're supposed to keep track of everything in order to attempt to get a refund or reimbursement, and there's never a promise that we're going to get a reimbursement. And once we do, though, then we go ahead and give it back to the appropriate departments, and then are able to move on. So I think that we should not hesitate to try and get a reimbursement on anything and everything. And if we don't, we don't. But if we do, then I'd like to keep that fund rather than having to give it right back.
Jonathan?
Yeah, just a closing comment. Even if we pay this expense of 20K out of ARPA funding, we're still going to have enough per the contract that is tabled or pending to cover those expenses. My initial statement was if we have a series of events like this into 2024, then that money is going to be exhausted. We may not, right? So we're good right now financially with ARPA, with doing both of these things. And yes, Supervisor Board Chair Pyska, we will look at all possible aspects of reimbursement, and I'll close with this. Unless there's any questions, I think you will be thrilled, and it will be our honor as a collaborative to present you with an after-action report outlining our successes, our timeline, patients transferred, steps forward, recommendations that can strengthen and build on how to use the remainder of those ARPA fundings in collaboration with all stakeholders in the county to address this need. So I just want to thank you, and from what I hear from everyone, it sounds like we're good to go, and there's still enough money in the reserve, and in the future we'll look at possible reimbursement and revenue streams in case we hit a choke point like this again. Thank you.
Stephen?
I did also want to add that the public health also has about $300,000 allocated to them for testing and vaccine sites, which was fully covered from other sources. And I have asked for the ARPA committee to meet again in March before every department submits their budget. So that 300 would have to be reallocated to something else within public health, which could be this, or to a different project. There's quite a, also, there's a bridge that was for special districts that is completely funded elsewhere, so 380,000 is going to be needing to be reallocated in our March meeting. So keep that in mind as well, if you will.
Go ahead.
Looking for a solution here, and Michael Green said it too, I'd like to get this contractor paid. So you made a comment that there could be funding in the public health department in realignment dollars.
Correct.
You made that comment that...
Correct. For example, this year, because realignment for public health was, has been going down a little bit, they're no longer paying for jail medical, the contract. They were prior years paying $200,000 or $300,000. So they're saving that this year. That's the kind of, so it can be used for those kind of services.
So I know on the agenda item today, it asked that they would use ARPA allocation for the EMS. I guess this would be a question for Anita. Could we make that change to say we're going to use realignment dollars with the concerns brought up by other board members that, number one, we get the bill paid, but we also can recover it in that manner. And if the availability is there, always looking for a solution that would help us move it forward. So if we could do something like that, I think that would help the board come together and move something forward, help Jonathan Portney. Obviously, a long conversation on what we know is an important issue that needs to be addressed, but also allows the county to maybe be reimbursed, potentially, no guarantee, but then you have the opportunity anyway. So I just want to make sure I don't wander off the agenda item here, but.
The item indicates potential funding source.
Okay.
So you should be fine, sir.
And if it's under the $20,000 mark, my understanding wouldn't even have to come back if they're using realignment fees.
Supervisor Sabatier?
And appreciate the comment, and I'm in favor of moving in that direction.
I am as well. Supervisor Crandall?
It's probably a done deal, but I just want to ask this question. If there's no reimbursement, it would be basically too late to even use ARPA funds. So this is the only path to go if we're looking at reimbursement. Unless we use ARPA today, ARPA can't be used later.
To the end of 2024.
It needs to be allocated before the end of 2024, and then we can spend it through 2026. But for this specific one, it would have to be through the end of 2024.
Okay. All right.
So it's general fund, ARPA, or the realignment within public health.
I think there was a question, though, if we did realignment today and then no other reimbursement source came up, could we then kind of reimburse the realignment dollars spent with ARPA money?
That would be a very different use, but theoretically, yes.
That's kind of the question
claim it
I
properly,
had.
and it'd be way after the fact, but it's technically possible.
The only reason I bring it up is because I remember when we funded, or on another budget item, we funded a whole different project and then ended up getting earmarks from Thompson and then put that back and then used the earmark for something else. I mean, I know it's only $20,000. asking that question, and you answered.
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah, but the potential of getting $20,000 reimbursed is significant. We do see that there could be potentially more ARPA money that could be reallocated within public health from testing. So if there's an expense that comes up that would be used, that those realignment funds would be drawn upon, they could potentially be used for, covered by ARPA funds in the future if that were to come up later this year. And then we wouldn't lose
If your
the,
board
yes.
agrees with those ARPA expenses, yes.
Right. But for me, it's just do not give up an opportunity to be reimbursed. And if something else comes up that is not a reimbursable expense, then we can look at that then. But if those funds are available there and there's a potential that we can be reimbursed, then I believe strongly that that's the way that we should go.
In that case, I can talk with Director Portney and our disaster finance and see how realistic it is and get the right paperwork there to try to submit.
Consensus
I feel there's consensus.
on this side?
Do you need a motion?
Probably a good idea.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
prepared to do a
but
motion.
I was just
when we're done.
wondering if everyone was in agreement, and then we can, yeah, now let's do the motion, okay.
Yeah, I think so. Did we do
What?
public input?
Oh, public input. Anyone in the chambers like to speak on this item, or anyone in the Zoom room? And I don't see hands, and I don't see anyone coming up, so we'll bring it back to the board.
Okay, Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to use realignment funds for EMS, for the Public Health Department, for EMS services to pay Mike Marsh EMS consulting contract in the amount of $20,000. That should cover it? All right, excellent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and working on this difficult issue. I'm glad we could find some resolution and move forward. So we've done that. So 7.5?
Yep.
Okay, we're at 7.5. Sitting as the Board of Directors for the Lake County Watershed Protection District, consideration of the purchase agreement with Eric Seeley for property within the Middle Creek Flood Damage Reduction and Ecosystem Restoration Project in the amount of $1,206,900 and authorize the Chair of the Board of Directors to sign the agreement. And this is with Water Resources, and there she is.
Hello again, good afternoon, Board of Supervisors, sitting as the Board of Directors of the Lake County Watershed Protection District. I am bringing forward the approval of a purchase agreement for the acquisition of a parcel located within the Middle Creek Restoration Project. So just as a refresher, similar to the other parcels and purchase agreements that the Board of Directors has seen in the past few years, we are utilizing funds allocated to us by the California Department of Water Resources, their flood corridor program. We onboarded a third-party consultant appraisal services through the county purchasing ordinance. We've been working with Monument Right-of-Way. They develop the appraisal. They do the negotiations with the parcel owners. And then once we get those prepared appraisals, we then send those appraisals to the California Department of Water Resources Real Estate Branch for review, and fingers crossed, and approval, which they did approve. And then the California Department of Water Resources notifies us that the appraisal and the purchase agreement is approved on their end, and then we bring it to the Board of Directors who ultimately purchased this parcel. And that's what I have right now.
Okay. Anything from the board? Supervisor Spatier?
Just a quick thank you for bringing this to us. This is a big chunk out of the landmass that we're looking at in Middle Creek Restoration. Just a quick question so that we are all aware. How long did the state take to finalize this appraisal? Because I believe it had been done quite a bit ago.
Yeah, so the state, we find, and again, with COVID, things have been very up in the air. They take anywhere from 4 to 8, sometimes 9 months to review the appraisals, and that's through their real estate branch. The previous history that we've had with the state most recently, they were having a lot of staff, the majority of their staff working from home. So that made difficulties, especially working with original documents, having to FedEx overnight them, and then making sure that someone's actually in the California Department of Water Resources real estate office to collect those hard copies of documents.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comment because it's just been a very slow process that has been really slowed down. Luckily, we did get that extension to continue using those funds, I believe, till 2028 now. But this is really good news to keep the progress meter running, and appreciate you bringing this to the board.
Okay, anybody else? Anyone from the public? And I don't see any hands up in the Zoom room, so I will bring it back to the board for action.
Madam Chair, I will motion to approve the purchase agreement with Eric Seeley for property within the Middle Creek Flood Damage Reduction and Ecosystem Restoration Project in the amount of $1,206,900 and authorize the Chair of the Board of Directors to sign the agreement.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we have item 4.1.
That must have been Mr. Seeley.
What's that?
That must have been the property owner.
Yeah. Okay, consideration of extra item, and B, consideration of resolution authorizing the application for the Permanent Local Housing Allocation, PLHA program for the Colliers Avenue Apartment Project. And there she is. And he is.
Well, there he is. Well,
It's not gone yet.
boy, I was
There's a blur on my glasses, Todd. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Todd Metcalf, Director of Behavioral Services. Thank you for allowing us to bring this to your board as an additional item, because this is it is a time-sensitive resolution. We are asking the Board of Supervisors for us to apply for the Permanent Local Housing Allocation Program funding, PLHA. We love those acronyms. In order to pass those funds through to Rural Community Housing Development Corporation to supplement the funds that are already being utilized for the Collier Avenue Housing Project, which happily, I've been getting a lot of emails, it closed escrow today. So I'm very excited about that. As you see, Elise Jones, our Administrative Deputy Director, is here, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, she has become more of a subject matter expert on this project than I have. And so I'm going to turn this over to her to elaborate a little more about this resolution and why we are hoping to get this approved today. So Elise, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, and I'll remember to introduce myself, even though you already did, because I failed to do so twice today. But Elise Jones, thank you for again for allowing us to present this as an extra item to your board and for it being accepted as such. This, as I stated, is a resolution that was already passed in 2022. However, that previously passed resolution failed to capture the full period of funding, which is 5 years. The first 2 years of funding are dedicated to the Collier Avenue project, and the subsequent and remaining 3 years are unspoken for, although I understand there are very exciting discussions taking place. That being said, the Housing and Community Development Commission has indicated that they need this resolution to be revised in order for them to review and consider our application. And while the escrow did close today, the review of the application through HCD and the grant funds that are associated with that review are on hold, and that is problematic. So we are hoping to button that up today.
Thank you, Elise. I couldn't have said it better.
Great. Anything from the board? Supervisor Spatier?
Is there any more?
I would love to say no.
Thank you.
I will say this, not that I'm aware of. How about that?
Let's hope it's the last.
Okay, anybody from the public wish to speak on this item? And I am not seeing anyone in the Zoom room, and nor anyone in the chamber, so I'll bring it back to the board.
If there's nothing further, Madam Chair, I offer the resolution.
Okay.
Okay, Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes.
Supervisor Green?
Aye.
And Supervisor Pyska?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And our last item of open session is calendars. Who is ready? Okay, go ahead.
Do this. One of the things we worked on last week, other than coming back here on Friday for interviews, was with Hope Rising, trying to finish up and button up their budget as we move forward, and looking forward to our conversations on our, I believe it's next Thursday, that we'll have our monthly meeting. And hopefully I can come out of that session to come back to the board with some of the next steps that Hope Rising will be taking. But I know I'm excited, and I just want to leave you guys hanging with that excitement for now. As far as tomorrow, I'll be in Lakeport most of the day with LAFCO and our Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority. Then have some Hope Rising, as well as I am the alternate, but still trying to stay apprised as to what's going on with the IFT meetings that will be happening on Thursday, just to listen in. And then the Clear Lake City Council meeting will also be taking place. And on Friday, it looks like the majority of my day will be dedicated to the Senior Center Meals on Wheels. And then also, if available, there is a Hope Rising meeting then as well, and I'll be going to check out the warming center as well, depending on if we decide to continue our interviews, but I don't know that.
Don't know.
Yeah. So that's my week. And on Monday, again, meeting with Hope Rising, our CAO, and preparing for our meeting on Tuesday. Do want to just advertise, it's the following week. I know we have a meeting on the 21st, but the 25th is the Clear Lake Highlands Senior Center fundraiser, where they'll be doing their annual hoedown, and I will be auctioning off some baked goods. If you haven't gotten your ticket, please contact our Clear Lake Highlands Senior Center and do so. And that's it for me.
Thanks. Are you ready?
Yeah, I guess I'll go. So I'll start with Wednesday, the RCRC meeting that I had last week. We had two very important speakers that really I was glad to have in the room. California Health and Human Services, Stephanie Welch, Deputy Secretary of Behavioral Health. And so she went through a series of like a PowerPoint and whatnot. But the real meat of everything is always the comments from different counties that we have. And so I know the Supervisor Verbant, and the reason I'm going to bring up what they say is because I supported all of them. They went in a circle, and so I had to go last. So he had stated how frustrating it is for his county when he thinks him and his colleagues are making good decisions on projects for homelessness and mental health in the community, and it's in a ministerial decision and solving a problem, and then the community is irate about the fact that specific people are going to live there. And he emphasized that, and then we all emphasize the same thing, is that more education to the community would be more ideal, because a lot of times they're left with, community members are left with no information on how it's really intact. So that was brought up. Funding sources that are on hold, they were worried, and she assured that there was no hold on funding. But a lot of the questions that were asked, the statement was, I'll get back to you and I'll go back to my staff. Another situation and question was from Supervisor Townsend from Tulare County, and he was frustrated with the fact that when the homes are built in county, there isn't necessarily a lot of local control with permits and whatnot, so it ends up happening without county, county oversight or planning or anything like that. So that also incites, and everybody was like, yes, because it also incites the same energy as we just discussed with the other supervisors' comments. Supervisor Alball from Lassen County had stated that they don't, same thing we say a lot, they don't have enough staff to continue with the grant funding. They have grant fatigue, and a lot of times when they obtain funding a couple years later, they have to find more funding because they've lost out or they've dealt with something else in a triage manner. And so that was the crux of that discussion, basically just supported a lot of what they said. Also, California Department of Fish and Wildlife Director Chuck Bonham was there for the California Fish and Wildlife, and that was a heated discussion as well. Endangered species discussions, that was mainly permits, things of that nature, and so that was brought up by me as well. I had a statement to them about the fact that we really need their assistance when it comes to illicit cannabis. They did a presentation for us on the ad hoc cannabis committee before, and they talked about how they were going to, start initializing some sort of assistance with that. Still hasn't happened, so highlighted that to them, and then also talked about our stream beds and all of our actual tributaries and how they have a high demand to be cleared and things of that nature. So any type of streamline or any type of other way around those could really help. He mentioned a couple things, so we're supposed to meet and talk about a statement that he made about emergencies. In an emergency situation, there's work that can be conducted, and I'm like, well, our emergency situation wouldn't allow that now because there's water in the streams, so we can't pull out any of the vegetation or sediment in that case. So we'll talk more, see how that goes. And the rest of the meeting went very well. They talked about a lot of different initiatives and how a lot of legislation that wasn't passed will be reiterated this year. And I'll send the overview of the meetings to all of you and then post it. I'll also post it in my Facebook so I don't belabor this calendar situation any further. Let's see. Then South Deal, we had the South Deal meeting. I ended up having to leave a little early for another thing, so I know Supervisor Simon was there the full time. I'll let him go into detail on that. PG&E meeting, RCRC has a monthly PG&E meeting to discuss the EPSS situation. Went through a lot of that. At the same time, a lot of other counties are going through the power outages, the floods, and things of that nature. So I really highlighted the fact that we weren't happy with some of the agreements that we made that were basically used in a fact where they told us this only applies to the power safety shutoffs. And so for me, I was letting them know that it should be all emergencies. Some of these policies, they have really put us in a bad spot. If they would have used some of the power generators and grid generators, that would really help. Or let's enhance that so we can ensure that from here forward, we don't have to sit without power if we don't have to, or make those agreements or policy revisions so we could have resource centers. So that was another statement, and also making sure that if they can't do the grid, can they give us or work with us to have a generator intact so we can have some of our resource centers or areas for warming shelter to be intact as well. So that was, there was more discussed, but it was basically around EPSS and how they're working more diligently to address some of those issues where the power lines are knocked down from trees or other things of that nature. So that was the Friday. Monday, I met with, yesterday I met with Region 9 EPA Director Martha Guzman, and we basically had a recap of the Farm, Ranch, Rural Federal Advisory Committee back in January, but then also talked about our meeting in DC, went over some of the discussion that we talked about, one of them mainly being how when it comes to prescribed burning, our county is in a unique situation where we are a disadvantaged community. However, because we have a high quality of air, we can't conduct prescribed burning because of that factor. It's weird, catch-22. So, the mindset for us is like, okay, well, would you rather have worse air due to a wildfire or worse air while we do prescribed burning. So, you know, talking about those things, I'm also having a meeting with them Thursday, another meeting with them Thursday to talk about the EPA Superfund site and some other initiatives in regards to some of the local tribes. And then Friday, I am also on what's called the ad hoc committee for that same EPA Federal Advisory Committee, Water, Energy, and Climate Nexus. So we'll be going over some policy that'll either take place this June or next year. So, yeah, there was like 10 different ad hoc committees you can join. I put this one on because it had a lot more to do with our situation. There's a couple others, but this one really fits us a lot more. So, so with that, that's basically what I did this next week. Where's that? Okay, this week. Tomorrow I go to Sacramento. I'm testifying before the Senate Government and Finance Committee, bridging the gap for local government infrastructure. And so with the assistance of Director Ewing, Administrator Harder, and Director De Leon, I'm going to prepare to talk in front of this group about our struggles with infrastructure and how we can bridge the gap for the state to ensure we can either get funding or streamlines or something along those measures to ensure we can get things done. So that'll be one of them. I may make the EPA testify. They asked me to do something like that at their building, but it overlaps, so I don't think I'm going to, because then I have to come back, meet with some folks in Clear Lake Oaks, and then Worth on Wednesday night. Thursday is the EPA visit that I mentioned. Friday is the ad hoc committee, and Monday I have something, but be back here Tuesday for the Board of Supervisors meeting. And then we have the special meeting Friday, right? Yeah, at 1 o'clock. So I didn't put that on there, but I'll make sure I'm here for that too.
Who's ready down here?
We're ready. That's a relative term. I do have IFT on my calendar for Thursday. I don't know if I've seen an agenda yet. I also have COC on there for some reason. I don't know if that is a regularly scheduled meeting or if I had just misplaced that. But I guess I'll figure that out. Friday, meeting with City Manager Ingram from the City of Lakeport. We're going to be starting to meet monthly over breakfast because breakfast is a good place to meet, and excited about that. Nothing firm on my calendar. I do hope to get out to Highland Springs tomorrow, a tour again, kind of where we're at, especially after today's storm. And again, I want to be super, super thankful to Director De Leon and all the staff that have been kind of fielding not just the disasters around the county, but also some questions about that. I am getting some inquiries on that. I haven't had the chance to speak with Director De Leon specifically on this, but I imagine we'll be edging toward some partial reopening or some stage stuff. There's still some very hazardous areas in there, but I'm assuming we're, with this worst of the worst right now behind us, we'll probably be trending toward getting that open sooner than later. And I think that's all I got. Fairly light. Oh, Friday, did get a request from CAO Stevens from Sutter Lakeside. I do expect I'll be scheduling a meeting on Friday, so thank you.
Okay, meetings for this week. I have LAFCO tomorrow here in Lakeport, also abandoned vehicle abatement. Did get a request from Senator McGuire for a Thursday night dinner, so you're going, I'll be there too. On Friday morning, have Workforce Alliance in North Bay, and just confirming whether, well, it'll be confirmed later, whether or not we have a special meeting. So if we don't, I will just travel to Napa from the south end of the county to be at the Workforce Alliance in North Bay. If we do, then I will let them know I'm doing it in the conference room. So we'll have that figured out later on. So on Monday, the Lake County Risk Reduction Authority, we meet here. We got to have a quorum in-house. That'll be our first one. It's going to be a challenge, but we will work through it. You know, I'm very clear about my Zoom skills. So we will we'll move forward with that. I did just want to talk a little bit about the South Deal Committee meeting. Not only we get updates on the projects as we move forward, I think the scheduling of the Canocti Corridor project will be in June, I think, is when they're ribbon cutting or something. It's been moving around a couple months, but I think June is the month it's going to happen. So I know Caltrans will reach out as that process goes through. But also wanted to talk, constantly every month. I know there's projects all around the county. I know Supervisor Crandall asked about some of the work done by Blue Lakes, and I think you had dropped off right before, but they did say there will not be no road closures. We'll have to use the backside. It'll be a one lane. They'll have traffic, but it won't be no complete closures. So I know you asked that question. I just want to let you know that. The other thing too, always with South Deal Committee, making sure that the Clean California program, that Middletown, I know that our AVA program, our Marcus Beltramo has reached out about amnesty days, RVs, if there's any opportunities, those conversations are still happening as programs are trying to be developed. And then, as they move forward, I took an opportunity too. We just had spoke about the North Shore Fire Crew. Told them, if there's any partnership opportunities with Chief Sciancio, that would reach out to see if we get any contact with them, if they could do any contracting or anything, because we want to make sure that's working together in collaboration with all the agencies. So I brought that up, and they said they were open to the conversation, so I'll follow up on that. And then ultimately, like I said, just smaller projects, most of them down south. One of the big ones that keeps coming up is Coyote Grade. If you go down on the South County, keeps slipping out. They're doing work. They're trying to get it going right. One lane is currently closed, but they're constantly working with the contractor to keep that updated. So, I think that is most of them. I know there were some other phone calls and follow-ups. I did follow up with the public comment, Greta, Backyards Gardens. I'll do it again this week, just to keep her, and I know she's really interested. South County, past the rancheria, even the rancheria, we're very interested in getting as much broadband service out there as possible, because it's real challenging, so I'll continue to keep her updated. I did let her know that we have positioned ourselves. We have signed contracts for consultants to be in position to get those funds brought into Lake County, so I'll just continue to try and bring that information.
All right, is that it?
I think so. I don't think I missed it.
Okay. One of the things that I had to do last week is go out with Water Resources and Code Enforcement and look at the blockages in Coal Creek, which is causing flooding on Clark Drive. And it continues to be a really difficult situation to have all those trees and blockages in the creek, and then the snow breakage, it just, made it that much worse. Unfortunately, because of how much flooding there was, and this is before it started raining, we weren't able to do any emergency work because there was just no way to get equipment there. But last night, I got some videos sent to me above where those blockages are by my planning commissioner that hitch were sighted in the creek, and she called out Big Valley, and they counted 1,000 hitch above that blockage. So that's really exciting that they somehow made it through there, and that they hadn't yet spawned, but the run has begun. So that's very exciting. Tomorrow, agenda review, and then I got a call from our good friend Trevor Mockel, who now works for the city of Ukiah, so he has something he needs to check in on, and I miss that guy, so I'm excited. A bi-weekly meeting on home hardening, and then Thursday, the law library meeting, dinner with Senator McGuire, then the Cobb Area Council in the evening. Friday, we have the Workforce Alliance Governing Board meeting, our special board meeting, if it happens. At the same time, I also have our bi-weekly staff hazard tree meeting with the Canocti Fire Safe Council, and then Monday, CAO meeting, benefit assessment zone meeting, and then risk reduction authority. So I will be here Monday afternoon. And that is what I've got. So we have completed all of our open session items. We're going to be moving into closed session now. We have 5 items. 8.1, public employee appointment pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1, interviews for interim behavioral health director, appointment of interim health director. 8.2, public employee appointment pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B, interviews for county council, appointment of county council. 8.3, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, D1, City of Clear Lake v. Testate and Intestate, successors of Bailey Lumber Company et al. 8.4, public employee evaluation from the county librarian. 8.5, public employee evaluation, county council. Thanks so much for joining us. And that's it.